first year or so, as Jeremy and I went around, visited people, talked to you at the meetings we've had, we heard common themes about procurement actions, one of which several of you actually have difficulty because you're just small organizations, you don't have the full range of technical staff to put together really neutral technical specifications, which the UNDP certainly requires, and many of your governments, if you elect to go through your government, also require. Too much reliance on the vendor in many cases. There's also this lack of technical capacity to really connect requests with outcomes. And sometimes this is, we refer to this as the ATM approach, where we just pay money and things happen. And they're not necessarily the things that we want to happen, we're paying money. Often there's too narrow approach on spending money by certain deadlines rather than really focusing on the ultimate goals that we want to get out of a project. And often there's equipment purchased with little or no implementation capacity. The boxes show up and then we stand and look at one another and say, who exactly is going to put this together? I've had that experience on Christmas Day sometimes. And then almost echoing, I got to coordinate two hands. This is going to be a challenge here. All right, and we were talking a little bit along these lines earlier today. Too narrow a focus many times on the hardware, the automatic weather stations, with little view towards the ultimate use or the data integration, so that we actually get ultimately the impact on users. So having said that, then we have set some goals. Both Jeremy and I are engineers by training, and so the first thing we want to know is what are we really trying to accomplish? And so first of all, we wanted to maximize, to the extent possible, regional and programmatic consistency. There are enough manufacturers in this world that the 11 countries here, each of you could go out and buy a different automatic weather station. And if you really want to do that, you could do that. But it makes it very hard then to compare apples and oranges. Yours works really well, but yours doesn't. Why? I can't tell you why, okay? But if yours works really well and they've got the same thing and theirs doesn't work well, I'm going to come and look at you. What did you do different? Okay? Increase purchasing power and obtain economies of scale. We'd always like to get the most for our money. And there's depending upon how you arrange a procurement, you can get more or less for your money. And if you buy more, usually if you again arrange, you could get some economy of scale. Enable ease of procurement execution. We've had any number of people saying that I'm going to be old and gray before the stuff that I'm ordering shows up. And so we're really trying to facilitate and make that happen more quickly. Enable the acquisition of comprehensive solutions while allowing for the acquisition of individual components if that's what you need. Some of you are pretty near scratch in starting. You're just rebuilding from ground zero. And so you need a full solution in a package. Others of you have very well established organizations that need to add things on. And so we had to provide for both of those possibilities. And we want to minimize operational risk. We do not have a lot of time in this project where we wind up spending years trying to get something to work. We want to try to get things that will work very quickly after they come out of the box and are installed. And this means we want to keep that operational risk low and look at functional end-to-end systems from data acquisition all the way through to product delivery. So our primary focus in putting this together was to focus on systems innovation for early warning systems and climate monitoring, not so much on refurbishment, repair, airfield operations, or whatever. We talked about that this morning. And I will note that the focus to date has been very narrow on meteorology. When Jeremy and I started this, we didn't have Yoast on board. Our plan is as soon as we get these finalized, the ink dried on paper, that we will turn around and devise another LTA for hydrologic equipment that will be compatible with everything we've got here. So that we'll just add in to the systems we're talking here. All right, the current status, First of all, we're an advisory role, and we don't necessarily know everything that you have done. And in fact, I was taking some notes this morning of people who have actually procured equipment through their local government, which is fine, and have taken delivery of it, getting it installed, that's all great. But we don't necessarily know about that directly in advance. We know that there are several national procurements completed or underway, and we've actually heard a number of those in the reports. There are two procurement modalities in place, well, one's in place and one we're trying to get in place. And I want to talk about these long-term agreements, LTAs for short. There's one that we have come to call the traditional synoptic and climate monitoring automatic weather station. And then there's another one, the comprehensive end-to-end innovative early warning and climate monitoring system. We have to call these something. And so the first one is, shorthand name for it is the ADCON LTA that was put into place by the World Food Program and is existent, is operating today. The second one is the one that we are working diligently on, trying to get it into place in a very short time. And you'll hear more about that shortly. The first one, this is the ADCON LTA, the traditional synoptic and climate monitoring automatic weather station. It uses, as I said, a previously existing LTA established with ADCON by the World Food Program. A number of you have ADCON equipment, and a number of you have reported a good success with this equipment. What it does, it provides what I think of as a traditional automatic weather station assembled from discrete instruments that you connect with cables to a data logger, and then it transmits the information on. We believe that Zambia is the farthest along in initially assessing this LTA. Burkina Faso, who also has a good base of ADCON equipment and had good success, they've expressed interest in using this one. And then we've heard some words from Uganda that suggest that they're also interested in getting this ADCON technology. Now, when I say shortcomings here, I don't mean in a negative sense. It's just that this LTA was set up for a particular purpose by the World Food Program, and from the perspective of a total solution, it does not provide a total solution. It does not provide for any built-in quality control. You can do some, but it's not really provided for specifically. It doesn't use the national radar proxy sorts of things that we can get from lightning data. It doesn't really do storm warnings or nowcast, or it doesn't do the forecasting of movement of severe weather, all of which are technologies that are otherwise available. And as you will see in a minute, we've included in the new packages that we're trying to get together. So nothing wrong with this LTA. It provides you a system that many of you are familiar with that seems to have worked well in a number of different environments. And if you elect to use this, fine. The comprehensive early warning solution, which supports monitoring, forecasting, and across multiple timescales of now, the near future, and the medium range. It took us about 6 months to pull together the technical specs. Now, beyond the technical specs, there's a whole bunch of legal stuff, which is why Metalina is sitting behind me, because I know nothing and I don't want to know anything about all the legal stuff. But we have worked on this. Georgie has come in and helped immensely, and pull together a set of specs that provides a, we think, comprehensive solution. There's been an international RFP out on this, and we have pretty much completed the evaluation of the bids that were received, and we're now in trying to finalize this through all the legal hoops that the UNDP has to set up an LTA, because it's a major commitment to run this for like 5 years. Here's what's in the new one, a series of components. And when we eventually get this out and start handing it out to you, you'll see an organization that's very similar to this. First of all, there is something we call a current conditions network, which incorporates automatic weather stations. There is a nowcasting system that is based around lightning detection technology. There's a forecasting solution that provides up to 10-day city forecast using model output statistics that are based on the previous current conditions network and your choice of global model input. There's data alerting and visualization system, which will provide you folks, the Met Service, and the public with early warning messages derived from the first three components. Now, here's where this gets different than a lot of other LTAs, and I think one of the reasons we're having a few problems in getting all the last I's dotted and T's crossed. Not only are we buying hardware, we are buying services. So if you are a small country that does not have an engineering staff, there is the option in this LTA to get a package of engineering support to implement 1, 2, 3, and 4. And you can also implement an agreement for ongoing maintenance and operational services. So these are services contracts within the LTA that you can access to bring in technical experts, to have training on site, to actually have people work there to actually keep everything running. And this, I think, is my last slide. This is a very simple schematic that I've adapted from a variety of purposes of what really a forecast operation looks like. A couple of you were talking about organizing a forecast office and so on. You have a variety of inputs up here, one of which is observations and measurements, and I've got the little red circle here. You know, we've spent a lot of time on this. Since I've been involved in this project, we've spent most of our time up in this area up here. The reality is we talked a little about in Dar es Salaam about QA, QC, and data archiving. There's also the need to do some climatology and overall product verification and validation. We get in global data and model output, and I think almost all of you receive some form of global data, either through a private arrangement or through the WMO. You go through some analysis and assimilation. You have a product generation, and often this is where the forecaster sits in this area right here. There usually needs to be some sort of translation to get this down to simple red, yellow, green, or a message, don't go out on the water today. And then finally the user group. The white arrows actually are here to indicate feedback loops so that you know how well your forecast worked, which is really an important part because a forecasting operation is a continuous learning experience. If you don't know how well the forecast worked, you can't learn by experience, and then you adjust accordingly. So what we're trying to do through this LTA that we're trying to set up through CIRDA is to actually provide you this full system. Now it's chopped up into blocks, so you don't have to buy the whole system if you don't want, but if you bought everything that's in the LTA, you would get something very close to this at the end of the day. And we have reason to believe that it would work. Pretty much, okay? The proof is in the pudding when you turn the key on and everything happens. But we have reason to believe it would work pretty well because we've kept it very simple. Okay, any questions for me on this? This is the philosophy that went into the design and ultimately was reflected in words that went out in the RFP.
So I'm guessing it's not an either or. We can make use of the second LTA even though we've made use of the first. We can make components of it that we need.
Yeah. And actually, if you remember on one of the phone calls that I was on with you, I asked, I think it was the AdCon rep or somebody who was getting the answer from AdCon, the output of the AdCon base station can be tied in, let's see, maybe get my right tool here, this link right here that runs into a QA, QC process. They say it will work, and their reputation is it's pretty good, so I'll believe them. Yeah. As I said earlier, when we started this process, we did not have JOST on board, so we don't have the hydrology in this particular package. The plan is, once we get this in place, then we're going to do one for hydrology. And the hydrology equipment will tie in right here. so that you can then use the hydrologic modeling software will go into all these different bits and pieces so that you have the same system will handle the hydrology. Because really, it's hydrometeorology. We've got to have both together to do it right. But we don't have that piece done yet, simply because we didn't have the expertise on board at the time we were doing it.
So I think the request from the water should do the procurement from UNDP for trying to shift
And maybe you'll provide the impetus for us to actually get all this done.
Could you say something little about the linkage to the AMSS?
Okay. That's a multi-message switching system.
That gets down into here because, oops, what happened? There, went too far. Hit the wrong button. That's in this area right here
Okay.
because that's your dissemination tool. And this, of course, is a very broad brush treatment. This box here covers a remarkable number of sins on how you get the word out, whether it's through television, SMS, single sideband radio, doesn't much matter, but it's all got to be done in this area right here.
I'm Evelina from the Procurement Support Office in Copenhagen. And as John mentioned, we've been working with CIRDA for a number of months now to develop these long-term agreements and to assist with other procurement processes. So just briefly, the scope of the presentation, I think I'm not going to go into too much detail on theory on the scope of the LOU that we have with Jeff, on the sort of processes behind an LTA, etc. Because from what I understand, from what your questions have reflected, and also from what Bonnie and John have reiterated, is that this is more hands-on, and really you want to know how and when you can use these LTAs, and when the procurement is done. I know a lot of you are running against very tight timelines at the moment as well, and that the procurement should be done before the year end. So there's quite a lot of pressure there. So I will just very briefly go on to the next slide. The scope of the LOU that was established back in 2014, at the beginning of 2014, included a number of services that PSO could offer the projects and country offices in terms of assisting with their procurement processes. And we have assisted with some procurement processes, not all, because I think a lot of the projects and country offices have quite a high capacity in terms of their procurement capacity from the UNDP country office. So for example, Burkina Faso has managed a lot of your own procurement. We've assisted, of course, but you have quite a good procurement capacity from the country office. The first project we assisted with was Sao Tome, Laurent. We worked together a year ago on the tender process, and that was just when I came on board the project. So that was the sort of my first insight into the JEF program, the CIRDA program. But another part of the LOU was to develop comprehensive supply mechanisms such as LTAs for the country officers to use. So not only assist with your procurement processes, but actually provide you the tools to procure yourselves. And another element there is, of course, once these LTAs are developed, to maintain, manage, and upgrade the resulting procurement tools, the LTAs, over the validity of the LTA, the lifespan of the LTA, which is usually around 3 years, although we're hoping to extend for another 2 and make it 5 years, because a lot of the services in terms of maintenance, operations, warranties, etc., need to span over a longer period of time. So, an LTA. You're all hearing LTAs all the time and talking about them. I'm not sure if, I think John did a pretty good job of explaining what an LTA is. But just to go into a little bit more detail, an LTA is a long-term agreement, simply, with a supplier who provides goods and services. And what it does is that it makes the procurement process simplified, both in terms of resources that have to be used on the process, in terms of going through regulatory procedures, going through compliance review committees, and it also saves on delivery time, because an LTA is an agreement that's already set up with a supplier for a number of years, which means that the competitive process in order to contract that supplier has already taken place. So you don't need to go through another competitive process, for example, the ITBs that you're conducting currently, or RFPs, which take time. I mean, usually, I think an ITB takes approximately 3 to 4 months, whereas once the LTAs are established, procurement can be done directly using the LTAs. There is a secondary bidding process that I will discuss in a minute to explain how you actually procure from the LTAs. So a little bit behind the process, I think John actually went through this, but just maybe to explain why it took so long. The LTA process was based on an RFP that was published. And an RFP is a request for proposal. So it's slightly different to the traditional ITB, invitation or international tender, invitation to bid, in the sense that an RFP covers the element of services as well. Now, a lot of country offices have been conducting ITBs to procure their equipment, their meteorological equipment. And what we wanted to do here was a little bit unconventional in that we wanted to procure services along with the equipment, which can be done in an ITB, but if you want those services to be very integral and important to the functioning of the equipment, in other words, you give more weighting to the service component of the proposal, then an RFP is the procurement modality, because then you're allowed to place a technical score or weighting on that sort of technical service component in the proposals received. As John mentioned, it took a while to develop the technical specifications for the goods and the services. And I think that the issue here was to put it into a format that was acceptable to our compliance review committee, because the RFP was the sort of untraditional, unconventional road to go. We went through a process of ex ante, which is getting approval before we actually publish. And this was just to be on the safe side, so we kind of had the rubber stamp before we went ahead. And the ex ante took approximately 6 to 8, no, I think 8 weeks altogether, which is very long for ex ante. And it's because we ran into a number of challenges in explaining to the review committee why we wanted to prioritize services. Because their immediate reaction was, this is equipment, it's meteorological equipment, you've procured it before through tenders, through ITBs, why don't you do a simple ITB process? It's safer, it's less risky, it's less subjective. And we really had to push it through and convince them that an RFP was the right way to go. So eventually we received approval from the ex-ante and CPO, the Chief Procurement Officer, and we published on June 19, and the tender was published for approximately 4 weeks, a little longer. We extended the deadline slightly to give suppliers or proposers more time. A lot of them were actually asking for more time because it was quite a complex proposal to put together for a lot of the bidders. And the closing day was July 21st. 7 proposals were received from 7 different suppliers. And Georgie and John can correct me if I'm wrong, but the 7 proposals were good. They were pretty, Georgie, you don't look too convinced. They were good proposals in the sense that they did offer all the lots, because that was a mandatory requirement in the tender process, that all suppliers had to offer all lots. You know, the alternative is to say, well, some can offer lot A, some can offer lot C, etc., and then you kind of mix and match and customize. But we didn't want that because we wanted a certain amount of responsibility and accountability in terms of delivering the services and linking them to the equipment provided. So out of the 7 proposals received, 2 proposals passed the minimum technical score, which is basically the bar for passing on to being deemed a technically responsive proposal. 2 out of 7 is not a lot, but Georgie may be able to go into a little bit more detail about why there were only 2. I'm not sure if you want to take that at some point. But basically the 2 proposals are the proposals that were the most comprehensive and that could provide all lots and meet the exact requirements that were listed in the terms of reference in the tender. We are currently, the status right now is that it has been submitted to ACP, which is our compliance review committee. And we're waiting for final approval. We've gone through a number of clarifications again, even though we went through ex ante. They're still questioning the modality of an RFP. There's a lot of questions, but I think we're finally getting there, and we really hope for approval, I would say by the end of this week or beginning of next week. Fingers crossed. So I can't reveal the actual suppliers at this point in time because we haven't received ACP approval. But I can tell you that there are two, and there will be 2 LTAs awarded to these 2 suppliers. And at this point, maybe it's important to mention, of course, but John already mentioned that we also have the LTA with ADCON through WFP. Both LTAs will be valid for an initial period, actually from what I understand now from the ACP, an initial period of 1 year, where it will kind of be a trial period to see how everything works and if they really do meet the requirements and deliver the services that we are requesting, and also in terms of sort of best value for money, if it's a really good route to go through these LTAs. But we then hope for extension, which will be up to 3 years, and then maybe possibly to up to 5 years following that. I won't go through the different lots because John has already described in brief what the LTAs cover. Those are the services as well that John described. Again, this is covered by, I think, John's presentation, but basically what each proposal provides. Just in brief, they both provide, as John mentioned, all-in-one automatic weather stations, so a more robust form of sensors in one unit. One of the proposals provides 5 sensors with fewer moving parts, so it's a little bit more robust than the other one. Both provide data collection transmission units, which are, from the one proposal, more an integrated system with storage, quality control, and transmission capabilities. Early warning systems. The second proposal provides a system which is a cloud-based system that reduces the need for onboard processing. And lightning detection. Antenna is a lightweight antenna and can be mounted on towers. And proposal 1, very similar, but again a different methodology and a different scope of equipment, also provides an all-in-one automatic weather station with 4 sensors and then additional sensors that you can add. So it's a little bit more, there's more moving parts and possibly not as robust as the first one. A data collection transmission unit, as with the first one, but this one is a modular system that has storage and transmission capabilities, but no quality control capability. So there's a bit of a minus there. An early warning system as well, cloud-based, and a lightning detection, where here the antenna is fairly bigger and has some line of sight limitations. And again, if you want to know more about the technical differences, I think Georgie can probably explain better than I can. Then just to touch on the ADCON LTA, because Zambia and Burkina Faso are currently utilizing the ADCON LTA, and as I understand, they've been quite happy so far with the services provided from ADCON. Basically, and John has mentioned it, that it's standard agro-met stations and synoptic met stations where there are suggested configurations in the LTA, but these configurations are flexible. Hardware and components, for example, data loggers, base stations, and the guy wires and poles are provided through the LTA. And there are a set of services, for example, assessment of existing infrastructure, installation, and training. ADCON do also do training, and as far as I know, they are going to be doing training in Burkina Faso as well. And they also provide volume discounts, so the more you buy, the higher discount you get. I put this here just to give you an example of what the LTA looks like, sort of a list of equipment. This doesn't include the services, with prices. There is some flexibility because the configurations can be changed, and there are some sensor ranges that are also that are flexible, that can be changed as well. But it's important to remember that when procuring through an LTA, the equipment you procure that's covered by the scope of the LTA can be used under this modality. Procuring anything outside of the scope of the LTA would have to go through some kind of procurement process or some kind of approval process. For example, ADCON doesn't include IT or data cluster equipment in their LTA. So if you wish to procure IT equipment from ADCON due to compatibility reasons, for example, you would have to go through either a direct contracting approval process or an RFQ, request for quotation. So access to the LTAs, and this is going back to the two LTAs, not the ADCON LTA. As I mentioned before, it will be done through a process of secondary bidding, which basically means that you will do a process of a request for quotation, and you will send your request for quotation or request for proposal, if there's quite a heavy service element there, to the two LTA holders, and request a quotation and proposal back from them, which will then be evaluated both on a technical and a financial platform. And I think the CIRDA technical experts are quite willing to assist with the technical evaluation of the quotations or proposals received. And PSO is on standby and of course very willing to guide you through the process. So, I mean, in simple terms, how to access the LTA? Contact PSO because we can give you all the information and guide you through the actual process of secondary bidding. And then of course we can monitor as well. So we actually, I mean, we encourage you to involve PSO in the process and contact us as soon as you want to use the LTAs, because we need to monitor the volumes and the thresholds for use of each LTA. I think that we can skip because that's the secondary bidding process. This is just the business process describing the secondary bidding. So your development of technical specifications, which hopefully have been reviewed by one of the CIRDA technical experts, notifying PSO, and we can assist with drafting the RFQ or RFP as well. That will be sent to the two LTA holders. We would submit the RFQ to the vendors, and then do the technical and financial evaluation once we receive the quotation or proposals back. And then award the identified vendor through a simple PO, a purchase order. So that would most likely be done by your UNDP country office procurement colleagues, I would imagine. And then I think it's a good idea here just to mention that we created a JEF procurement module on PSO's intranet site, and this was to gather all the knowledge and information that we've been sort of collecting over the last 9 months and put it somewhere that is accessible to UNDP country office colleagues. Are you able to access the... Maybe not. So this is PSO's intranet site. And down here is the JEF procurement module that we created. The one in this one here, if you just click on it, I can just show you very quickly what there is there, because this is also where the actual LTAs will be uploaded, and all relevant information regarding the LTAs, including the standard operating procedures that we are currently developing to utilize these LTAs. But here you can also find the LTA with ADCON. Let's mention the, okay, let's exit that one then. And the other LTAs that we're developing. If you go back to the main PSO intranet site, I would like to show you something else, because I was discussing with the Benin colleagues, and as I understand, they have already procured their meteorological and hydrological equipment, but are currently conducting a tender for IT equipment, for IT hardware and data cluster equipment. This is something that PSO can also assist with, because we have a number of LTAs from other agencies that we are able to piggyback on for IT equipment. So for example, right now we are conducting a procurement process for Kenya, Met Office, KMD, for their data cluster equipment. And we're doing that through an LTA holder, Planson, who so far have provided excellent service and are incredibly good at collaborating with both KMD and with the meteorological equipment provider. So they're quite willing to sort of take conference calls and discuss the technical issues involved in the software, the setup of the hardware, etc. So, I mean, by all means, go out and tender. But if you want to sort of take a shortcut and save on time, and resources, we do have LTAs established for IT equipment that are open to all country offices to use. That's about it. I can open the floor now to questions, or I can let Joaquin maybe just...
The session is divided into three sections. The first section, I will talk about how to distribute the responsibilities between PSO and the country office. The second section, I will talk about the advantages and disadvantages of using the LTA or outsource the procurement to PSO. And the last session, I will share with you some lessons learned that we experienced with Malawi and Pakistan. So the first session, as I said, the first step would be the development of technical specification or requirements. That is the most important phase because, as you know, PSO doesn't have the technical expertise on board, so we need to have the technical specification and conducted by the technical experts. So the second step would be review the technical specification. Basically, we receive the technical specification and we ensure that technical specifications are generic and neutral. That is something conducted by PSO. The third step would be conduct a market research and sourcing activities to ensure supplier awareness. We have different tools like request for information, expression of interest. The final purpose is to have a better understanding of the market, like tendency of prices, market trends, identify the big players of the market. The other step would be development of solicitation documents and tender dossier. Basically, in that step, we include the technical specification in the tender documents and we customize accordingly the tender documents, and we customize the evaluation criteria based on the tender documents, based on the technical specification. We can choose pass and fail or different evaluation criteria. And we also select commercial requirements like previous experience, financial soundness, depending on the project. The next step will be issue a tender and manage the solicitation process. We advertise and publish the ITB in UNGM and UNDP website. And we receive a lot of clarification from a technical point of view, from a procurement point of view. And the next step would be to share with the technical experts the technical questions in order to get technical answers. So after that, we receive the offers and conduct a bid opening accordingly, and we start with the evaluation process. We start with the preliminary examination. Basically, in this phase, we evaluate if the supplier submitted the basic information like bid submission form, price schedule, plus they comply with the commercial requirements like the previous experience, financial soundness requested, that kind of things. After that, we conduct the technical experts conduct the technical evaluation, and as I said before, we always review the technical evaluation in order to ensure that the UNDP procurement rules and regulation has been followed. And we finish with the technical evaluation and we conduct the financial evaluation. And the last stage would be to compile all the information and to prepare the case to the review committee. Basically, the final purpose of the review committee is to ensure that all the process has followed the UNDP rules and regulations, fairness, integrity, effective competition. From the ACP submission, we received a lot of clarification from a technical point of view and from a procurement point of view. So again, at this stage, we need the technical expertise on board. And after that, we issue the purchase order through ATLAS, and we manage the contract with the country office. And I would like to highlight that this is an important stage in terms of delays, because it's important to have a good coordination with the country office in order to avoid delays. Because as we know, we are the final responsibles of the custom clearance, and many times the delays come from the custom clearance. So in the section part of the presentation, I will talk about the advantages and disadvantages. We have basically two parameters to compare. If we use the LTAs, it's obvious that we are saving time. It will take 1-2 weeks, basically for the secondary bidding process. And the normal procurement process, the outsource the procurement to PSO, it will take 2 months, the minimum 2 months, so 2 months and a half. And the customization, for instance, for one specific requirement that is not covered in the LTA, water level sensors, for instance, or some additional sensors, I would say that the best approach would be to outsource the procurement to PSO because you cannot cover that equipment through the LTA. So in the last part of the presentation, I will talk about the lessons learned. I will share with you 3 lessons learned. 2 with Malawi, meteorological equipment, and second with Malawi, hydrological equipment, and finally Pakistan for automatic weather stations. The first one, basically, in this case, we received the technical evaluation from the technical experts. And during the technical evaluation, the technical offer from CF Microbes, one bidder from Italy, was in principle rejected. So as I said, we always review the technical evaluation in order to ensure that the UNDP procurement rules and regulations have been followed. And in this case, the technical experts basically found a deviation. The software was based on old Windows, old softwares, old version of software, and these operating systems are old and not supported on new computers. So basically here the question is if we consider that deviation as a minor deviation or major deviation. If we consider that deviation as a major deviation, the offer will be rejected. And if we consider as a minor deviation, we can accept the offer for the next stage, that would be the financial offer. So the question is, would be minor or major deviation? So basically, the type of software was not specified in the ITB, and the technical evaluation, as I said, is based on the technical specification of the tender document. So based on the technical specification, we cannot reject that offer because we didn't specify the specific software that we are looking for. And we run the risk of vendor protest if we reject the company, because the company can say, okay, you didn't specify the type of software, so I will provide you this software, and that could be a potential problem. So the lesson learned would be the need for developing very clear and detailed specifications that convey the exact requirements in order to avoid this kind of situations. So the second lesson learned for the hydrological equipment in Malawi, basically we received a huge price difference between the first SEBA and second lowest priced offer. The price difference came from different type of hydroplates offered by the bidders, and the reason behind for that, because basically there is always a reason behind when you receive a huge price difference, and in this case, the price difference for the hydroplates between the two suppliers was approximately 50%, more than double, and we can see here the unit prices multiplied by the quantity, that is 1,500, if I remember correctly. And this was mainly because the hydroplates offered by ACMIN, the Italian suppliers, were made of anodized aluminum with anti-corrosion treatment, but the hydroplates offered by SEBA was made of sheet steel. That is the origin of the price difference. So again, the lesson learned would be the same. The type of material was not specified in the ITB, so the need for developing a more detailed specification to allow bidders to submit comparable offers. So we have to specify, we had to specify the type of material in order to avoid this situation. So the last lesson learned with Pakistan basically is from the warranty conditions. The ITB document didn't specify the warranty condition and requirements, and the committee review basically advised that the procurement unit should have specified in a clear manner what were the warranty conditions expected by UNDP and the ITB. So basically we received different type of warranty condition from the offers, and we couldn't compare the warranty condition. That was a huge problem during the evaluation.
What's the breakdown of this? Is it one unit of the entire equipment, or
Are you looking at
hydrological?
the hydrological from
Malawi.
From Malawi, the SEBA?
Yes.
Yeah, it's for one unit. The difference is in the unit price.
Maybe the rest will be shared in the clinics, but there are more questions too. There's a lot to understand about the equipment.
Yeah, thank you. Let me follow on Montlina, about the secondary bidding process, I was a bit scared about it. Can you soften my heart and elaborate?
Well, I can tell you that PSR will definitely guide the project through the secondary bidding process. It's really not a complicated process. I mean, the LCA is supposed to simplify the procurement process. So secondary bidding really is just a competitive bidding between the two suppliers, which means that once you have your technical specifications or your terms of reference for services complete, we will then put that into a format, and we have a template that we're developing under the standard operating procedures. We'll put that into a format and submit it to both LTA holders and ask them then to come with a quotation based on the LTA ceiling prices and the indicative prices for services in the LTAs. And once we receive those quotations, they will then be financially evaluated. So in procurement theory, it would be the least expensive, technically compliant quotation or proposal. However, there may be instances where some of the projects identify requirements that can maybe only be offered by one supplier, where we would waive secondary bidding as a special case, really. But PSO would still assist with the process. So both the financial evaluation we can assist with, or conduct as well for you, and the CIRDA technical experts would be able to do the technical evaluation of the proposals or quotations received in from the two suppliers. Have I softened your
because we don't want to go through the process again.
No, it's not a procurement. It's not a full procurement process. I mean, a full procurement process usually takes around 3 to 4 months, and secondary bidding can take 3 days. I mean, it's a very, very fast process.
Okay.
So once the LTAs are established and we've awarded the contracts, country offices projects can go out and procure through PSO. We will assist, and the secondary bidding process really will not take longer than, I would say, maximum 2 weeks, unless there are unclear specifications. I mean, unless a lot of things have to be clarified from the NHMS, the Met departments, the projects, where the suppliers may have questions to your specifications, where that's a little bit out of our hands because that's more technical.
So I think we would come in as the technical experts and help define the final design and requirement, if you will. It's like you want to go to KFC or McDonald's. Both will satisfy your hunger, but you have to see the menu and choose from it, right?
That's right.
Thank you very much, Maitreya and Greg. One of the questions, one is on the capacity of the farms to deliver on expected time, given that the discussion that we've had over the last 2 days, more than 90% of the countries are just sitting at the edge waiting for the LTA. And the likely is that everyone is just holding their own specifications in the pocket and waiting for saying the LTA is ready, supply. So I just want to double check that we
in terms of the timeline, or
in terms of the timeline, the capacity of the companies to supply on time. 2, but also for the PSO's capacity to deal with the requests from the countries. The indication you provided is that yes, it will take 1 to 2 weeks. I assume this is the secondary process. Assessment up to issuing a purchase order. So I just want to get some comfort from PSO. And then the last one is on the process. The country offices will submit request to PSO. And then PSO from that point will deal with the LTA. So I just want to know the triangulation between the country office, PSO, and the LTA.
It gets a little bit. I'll start with the last question. Again, I'm going to refer back to the LOU that PSO has with CIRDA. Our function is to assist and guide the procurement process, not to conduct the procurement process. That's not covered in the LOU. And because that's out of the scope of the LOU, if country offices or projects want to outsource their entire procurement process to PSO, we can do that. But because it's out of the scope of the LOU, there's a cost recovery fee. Now, some projects have chosen to do that to simply avoid any of the procurement processes. Malawi, for example, did that with their meteorological and hydrological equipment. So in terms of the secondary bidding, I mean, yes, you can send us your requests and we will guide you through the process, but we will not be conducting the procurement for you. Here I understand that you all have your procurement focal points in the country offices who will actually conduct the procurement. I mean, when it comes to receiving the quotation with our assistance, of course, and financial and technical evaluation, we will assist you in then issuing the purchase order to the identified supplier. But the purchase order will be issued by the country office, the UNDP country office. Does that answer your last question?
It doesn't. In a sense, we were at this stage about 6 months ago discussing this issue between Uganda and the PSO on which option to use. And then my understanding through the presentation was, yes, the CIRDA program has processed the LTA, the LTA is ready. Now what countries can do is submit your specifications to PSO, and then PSO issues. Now you are saying is that so what kind of assistance is PSO going to provide to the country offices? I mean, if we have the LTA, why do we have to go back to PSO? Why does the procurement unit at the country office issue an LPO or a request for quotation from the two contractors, and then so I just want to double check between the PSO and the CIRDA team and the country office, who is playing what? It seems not clear now for me.
The country office, the procurement focal point of the procurement office at the country office level issues the purchase order and conducts the procurement. And PSO acts more as a guidance or advisory service that can assist the country office with their procurement.
Onesimus, 6 months ago, but even before that, when we signed this agreement with PSO, I circulated to all of you the LOU, which very clearly mentioned two options. One was wait for the LTA and use that LTA. That doesn't mean that PSO does your procurement. They do the LTA, and then they can give some guidance. But once the LTA is in place, the country office procurement unit needs to use it. It's not PSO who's going to use the LTA, it's your office. There was a second option, which was to say, like Malawi did, we don't want to do this procurement. It's too much headache for our little procurement unit in Uganda or whatever. Outsource it to PSO entirely. It comes at a cost. They need to recover some of their costs. So these two options were given, I think they were fairly clear. So now what we need to know, or what your procurement office needs to know, is if you have the capacity in-house to then use these LTAs. If that's a problem for any of these country offices, then you need to come up and say it. Because we still have option 2. You can still outsource the procurement, right? If cost recovery is there. So I think all of you need to go back and talk to your head of procurement and say, look, we're going to have these LTAs. Are you capable of using them? And then normally LTAs are there to make their life much easier. But as long as we're going to use LTAs, it's still the country office procurement unit who's going to have to drive this process of using the LTAs in collaboration with CIRDA experts and yourself and project managers and all that. But it's still at the country level. The agreement that we had with PSO, and you can go back and read that, was they're helping us set up these LTAs for everybody. Because otherwise each country office would have had to go through this process of setting up an LTA, which would have been a headache. So I don't know if again it answers your question, but these LTAs will simplify, will allow you to place orders and all, but it doesn't take away entirely some of the work that the procurement unit needs to do at country office. For that to happen, you need to go to the second option, which is an entire giving it up and saying PSO do it, and it comes at a cost. 3-4% or whatever.
I want to make clear, you guys are still responsible for formulating your requirements, and then sitting down with the technical descriptions that are in the LTA and deciding if what is offered by company A meets your requirements. I mean, you have to do that evaluation. And you may decide, okay, this doesn't exactly meet my requirements, but it's close enough. Then so I'll go with this rather than trying to hassle out a particular requirement or procurement just for that item. So you still need to formulate very carefully your requirements, and then certainly Georgie, the other, will sit down with you by phone, by Skype, or if we happen to be visiting, and say, okay, you say this doesn't meet your requirements. Let's look at the exact number. The second decimal place doesn't fit. And I can guarantee you'll probably spend some time on the web looking at the catalogs from the company. Madalena's posted a lot of material that we went through in our evaluation to try to understand what the company was offering, to make sure it was a good offer. But you still have to go through that process, because at the end, it's your stuff. And we're here to help. And this will speed that process because it's already pre-bid. We know what the prices are if you decide to go with this. But that's a decision, it's a different type of decision.
Maybe just to add, maybe also
Anything else? I mean, you have a discussion, so yeah.
Yeah, just to add, the presentation from Zambia might also help to describe the process they went through, procuring through ADCON, where we assisted and facilitated the process, provided the tools, the LTA, but they conducted the procurement. I mean, they issued the purchase order.
Yeah, for me, I thought we have passed this stage already. I think we've been going up and down on this ever since. I think from our country office level, we are clear that we are passing this on to PSO. We are passing this on. We want the PSO to take on everything. So what we need to now do, even at that, I know we still have to do X, Y, Z. That's what we want to know clearly. But we are passing on our procurement unit is clear on that. We don't have the capacity, and the government is also in consonance with us. We are passing on the responsibility to you. So we need to know. I need to leave from here so that we have a basis of taking a decision, some kind of tentative timeline. Considering that we are passing it on to you to do everything. I need to leave from here with some tentative, even if it is on bilateral issue, not here in general, but we meet and come up with some timeline so that I'll be able to share with my country office based on which we take decision in terms of budgets we have, whether we need to do revision or so forth. Is that possible?
It is possible, although I'm going to be very honest here. It's actually the first time I've heard that you are outsourcing the procurement process to us, because we discussed this with your procurement focal point, Aisha Sharif, who we have passed on information. I think we have also recommended that she gets in touch with the CIRDA technical experts, who were then going to come back to her after the workshop. And as I understood from her, the procurement was going to be done by the procurement office there. And I think that was something that initially Shazad, prior to Aisha, had agreed on with PSO, where it was about 7 months ago where we initially agreed that the procurement would be conducted by your office. But I mean, that being said, of course, we're more than happy to take on the procurement if you prefer to outsource the entire procurement to us.
Yeah, in fact, this is where we had this is one of the reasons why we had all these wastes of time. During the tenure of Shaja, initially, during the Skype, he said, yes, the procurement office will be able to take on the responsibility. But at some point he left, and when Asha came, she said, no, we don't have the capacity. We don't have the capacity. Let's outsource it. This is it. Yeah.
That just hasn't been made clear to us yet. So we haven't been made aware of that. But I can take up a Skype call with the project and Aisha next week, and we can discuss the options and the possibilities. But again, I mean, once we have these LTAs in place, the procurement will be swifter and will be easier. So yes, of course, we can definitely conduct the procurement for your office.
Okay, thank you very much. In Tanzania, of course, the TMO is doing the procurement itself, and the water basins, the first batch they did it themselves, and the second one we are going to do it from the country office. But my issue, you know, we've been communicating with you, not regarding this project, but on procurement of vehicles. Remember, it was between our procurement unit, Yona, specifically Joachim and you and Godwill. Yeah. And it was a very big procurement on vehicles, government vehicles. And we had to create or to develop an LTA for that specific procurement. And the process was too long. And finally, we've been able to do that. And during the process, then you couldn't really provide support that we really wanted, because the procurement was returned to the office, and now we have to start all over again using direct procurement based on advice. So I'm trying to think, I mean, your dependability, I mean, how much can we depend on you, I mean, your efficiency? Because now we've lost a lot of time, and of course, the trust from the government, because the procurement was very big and the vehicles are supposed to help the Tanzania electricity company to support the expansion of electricity. And the time has passed, and then I have to start all over again. So I'm trying to think how much you can depend on your assistance in this aspect.
This is procurement of vehicles, and to be honest, I haven't been involved in that procurement exercise. But I can say that as far as I know, and maybe this is not the right forum to talk about this because it's not anything to do with the CIRDA procurement activities, but just to touch on it, the procurement process was conducted together with a technical advisor that we hired. Everything went through a very stringent process. It went to ACP. Oh no, it didn't go to ACP. The supplier was identified after a technical and financial evaluation, but the government of Tanzania, or TANESCO, did not want the supplier that was identified. And I think that was the issue in the end, that there was simply an issue with the supplier.
You should be able now to provide technical assistance to see how that can be handled, but eventually it came back to us, and then we have to start all over again from the country office, and it's becoming so difficult now.
Yeah, I mean, maybe we should move on.
No, I'm trying to get general overview of how the PSO can be able to support under this project. So I'm trying to see, based on this example, how much we can depend on the PSO.
But can I just then answer that, because maybe it is a valid point in terms of you're asking about dependency on PSO. In this case, with vehicles, a supplier was preferred before the procurement process. And that is a non-transparent component of a process. So if we conduct a transparent competitive process and a supplier is identified, that, as per procurement regulations, is the identified supplier that should be awarded. And I'm now going to transfer this to meteorological equipment. We have a similar, issue. If you already have an identified supplier or preferred supplier and you tell us to conduct a tender or a competitive process, we cannot guarantee you that that supplier is going to win the tender. So I think you have to bear that in mind. And then we have to opt for another procurement modality. For example, direct contracting with strong justification. And that is another option that we can consider. But a preferred supplier can never be identified before a competitive process is done. Yeah.
So it highlights that if you're going to do an ITB route, you really have to be very clear about your specifications and try and narrow it down as much as possible without actually identifying where you want the equipment to come from. So it's quite an involved process. You have to put some time and effort into that, I think, if you're going to guarantee you get what you want.
And just to add on what is being said on this, I don't think we can compare cars and weather stations completely, because both perform services. Cars will take you from A to B, and weather stations will give you weather information. But to justify that you're rather a Toyota than a Ford because it's going to take you better from A to B is difficult. But to come up and say, look, we have 70 ADCON stations, we're adding 20, don't give us Vaisala because it's not compatible, is a much easier argument to make. So I wouldn't make that, that comparison between cars and automated weather station is not exactly accurate, I think. Because you can make an argument about weather stations being compatible with an existing network, etc., etc. It's not really valid for a car. Let's see what happens.
Ms. Elena, when it was about the ITV in Southern principle, I do remember that the team in Copenhagen worked hard. At the start, it was with Joachim. I think he was on holiday. Then they referred me to Metelena. She was the one disturbing me because every time Shirumuta will do a comment, she will track me down. She was even calling me by night. That's to say that I do remember she involved Mark Tedros, to help us to have a proper specification. And Ben helped us a lot here in the office because he was able to go up or down to see Blessed. And I think just a matter of being proactive to have the issue sorted out.
30s old vehicle and tell you, here, you said you wanted a car, you didn't say you wanted a 2010 model. Does that really make sense? I mean, can anybody, in his right mind work with Windows 95 in 2015? I personally, I'm not criticizing, I'm just saying for me, this is common sense. So when a supplier is ill faith or ill will to say, oh, it's cheaper for me to give you free software that's 20 years old, we should say, look, you're not serious. We can't say, oh, we should specify that we want Windows 10 because it's the latest. That for me,
We really should. We should have very clear specifications.
why? Why should they? I mean,
this is why you need an engineer and a technician. I really mean that. Because if you're buying a workstation, particularly some of you want to buy very sophisticated, high-end workstations, you have to be very careful in writing those specifications, or you'll get a very high-end piece of junk that you can put in your lobby. And I've even seen that happen in university settings where somebody didn't include this particular driver or this particular hookup, because if you don't say that, they're not going to give it to you. Okay? I mean, I really mean that. That's why you need a good engineer, you need good computer techs, you need good med techs to go over and over and over your specification.
But just to add to that again, I mean, there is a fine line between minor deviations and major deviations. And here you have to, apply common sense as well.
Right. And interest of UNDP. Because I think that's a big rule.
But I think in this case, it was a minor deviation. Because we didn't specify the IT.
So who takes that call? As minor or major? Who makes that it's a
procurement call in the end. Actually.
No, but what I'm saying is that it's a decision that is subjective. It's not an objective decision. You're saying who decides that this is minor? When my computer is not going to run because I don't have the right software, I don't consider that minor.
No, but the procurement call is made based on the fact or the risks that could be run. So you can very well run a vendor protest, and they would be quite sound in saying, we provided what you required. Why are you rejecting our proposal?
But isn't there in the rules and in the philosophy of the POP, etc., that it has to be in the interest of UNDP and
that's one procurement principle. It does come fourth on the list of 4, but I mean, yes, of course it is.
At one point, we need to be able to fight back and say, you're not in good faith. How can you provide us outdated stuff? We haven't specified, but it's not in the best interest of UNDP to get 15-year-old software. So we're not taking this on.
I mean, I think in this case
this case make it a major deviation.
Right.
Because it's a subjective call.
But they were not awarded in the end.
No.
Right. Yeah.
I'm sorry, but you really do have to write tight specifications. And it can be covered. You want software that is up to date. I mean, you don't have to be specific and say you want Windows 10, but it has to be current software, compatible with whatever you're trying to accomplish. And that sometimes can get tricky because some data acquisition software is old. They run on an older operating system. So you've got to be sure that if you really want that, say, modeling system, that you're getting a compatible operating system on the computer. That's why you got to have a good technician really sit there and look at this very carefully, read all the fine print. Otherwise, you get very high-class junk.
I wanted to reserve this moment until the clinic, or maybe others will benefit from it. It's a question. We've been discussing it with the country office procurement, but they haven't brought it to your attention. But we were asking if, as we were thinking of piggybacking on the Malawi process for the hydrological equipment, but we had some additional equipment we needed that Malawi doesn't need. So, but it was still possible, just for the benefit of others. But it's still possible to piggyback on a process that they have their own list. We have a list, there are some similarities, but there are some differences in the spec and even in additional equipment.
Yeah.
So that's still possible.
Thank you for bringing it up, because actually it's a good thing to mention here. And I mean, I know the point of this workshop is to discuss and share experiences, and that can also be done on a procurement platform, because a lot of you are conducting procurement processes that are being replicated from one office to another. And there is a procurement regulation that states that you can piggyback on another procurement process if it has taken place within less than 1 year back, and your specifications are the same. Now, the same can be, there are slight deviations that are allowed, but they have to be similar. If there are additional units or equipment or services that should be procured, you can still use that process, but then for those additional items, you would have to go through a process of either direct contracting or a competitive process. So in theory, yes, you can piggyback on, for example, Malawi's tender, because it's an international process that's taken place and that's been approved by a compliance review committee. No problem. But you have to make sure that your specifications are, or your requirements are the same as what was procured in Malawi. And I've discussed this with Aicha, and we're still in dialogue. As far as I know, she is still waiting to hear back from the CIRDA technical experts, I think, on the specs. So that process has been initiated.
I want to go on with the last presentation because it may answer some of the questions. Because Zambia got out in front here with the ADCON, and several of you are interested in ADCON related equipment, I've asked the Zambian folks, please come forward and just share a little bit of their experience in using the first LTA that's in existence, it's operating, and let us know how that's gone.
While the presentation is still coming on, let me say through John and through Materina, thank you for the advices that you gave us as we're going through the process. The technical advices that you gave us were really very useful. You saw things earlier than we could notice them, and that was really very good. We'll give it as two people because I talk more about the weather and the clouds, and then John will come in and talk about the other part. So we'll give, let me say, as we were asked to give a presentation, it was hard to begin to think what will be the most relevant information that this team will be listening to and required to learn from us. So we sat there and said, this is what we think we can give. And I hope it will be relevant to each and every one of you. So we started with the existing automatic weather stations and then the standardization of the automatic weather stations, then the process and the use of the LTA. The first two, I'll talk on them, and because it builds to what really came into the LTA. ZMD, which is Zambia Meteorological Department, has a network that has 39 manual stations and now stands with 81 automatic weather stations. In the beginning, we bought 8 automatic weather stations that we got from Delta Delta T rather, and then a number of other organizations that automatic weather stations that were not joined onto us, and they're still not joined onto us. Then we later on began to install more automatic weather stations. What we have on the left is what originally came from Delta T and was later modified because it didn't have some components that we needed to be in existence in them. And then the one on the right is the one that we got from ADCON. With those that we got from Delta T, we didn't have the RTU, which is the data log and the communication component of the automatic weather station. And then the 23 that we got from ADCON were all equipped with that. And then there was a challenge that we could not get data on real time. And the laptops that were bought to be able to download data from the 8 Delta T stations were not really full operational. So eventually they stood up as what in English would say white elephant stations, until the challenges then came that we needed to have real data just as we're having from those that were supplied by ADCON. And that prompted the Department of Meteorology to look at standardizing our automatic weather stations. And ADCON came into play that they provided the RTU and configured them to work with our base station. Without that, we were going to end up having a base station for each of the makes of automatic weather stations, one for Delta T and then another one for ADCON, or another station that was automatic weather station make that we're going to have. With ADCON, after we resolved with and agreed to use ADCON equipment, they trained our staff in the management and installation of the equipment, both in hardware and software, and then they helped our department install most of those automatic weather stations that I'm talking of, the 31. And up to now, I think only about 8 or 10 were done by our department. And then there's an agreement within them and us that makes them monitor the stations as they operate in real time. We both see the stations and they also see the stations. So each of us can note the mistake or the error or the problem in time, whether by them or us, and then we attend to them with their assistance. And then we have real-time data displayed on Google Earth map. Unfortunately, communication between the station and us here hasn't been good. I would have demonstrated how it really appears, but the network has not helped us. I hear there's a problem at home, so you don't have that advantage to see it, how it operates. But we get data in real time every 15 minutes. We can see what is happening everywhere. We can see each element of or parameter of weather that has been observed there. That is where we are. And when we were asked now to dealing with the 28 automatic weather stations that we want to buy and the climate information and early warning system, we already had this space. And we made a request that may we continue with what we already have. And I remember there were a number of emails, and we had a conference, and thereafter the team agreed with what we have. It was like, okay, if that's what you have, we want, have it. But surely their input into it were very good. And I believe you extend that help to everyone else that is going the same way that we're going through. Let me mention that we didn't know about the LTA of ADCON when we were dealing with it. It was introduced to us after we requested to continue with the ADCON, where we have bought most of the equipment. And having come to this point, I'll ask my colleague Chongo to continue with the process of procurement, because he's more in that area than me that looks at clouds and rainfall.
Thank you. Just a bit of a correction. I'm more of a programs person than procurement. To begin with, we were quite happy when we were informed that there's an LTA, an existing LTA with ADCON, because ADCON was the preferred and highly recommended supplier for Zambia Meteorological Department. From the country office side, we had to ensure that the LTA is still valid, and from the readings of the LTA, it is up to 2017 rather, yes. Then secondly, we had to ensure that the originating agency, which is WFP, in this instance, that set up the LTA permits the use of other agencies, in this case UNDP. Okay, and then we had also to ensure that the vendor has demonstrated performance under the LTA, and I assume they have performed well with the provision of instruments. And from our side, we had to ensure that the specifications and quantities were prepared, and this I can say was done well in advance with the Zambia Meteorological Department in collaboration with the CIRDA technical experts and the PSO. And then from those specifications, we had to request for a quotation from the supplier ADCON. We received the quotation, I think, 2 weeks ago, and the process, I can say, was quite fast, in that what we had to do as a country office is, those of you that are familiar with Atlas as a financial system in the UN system, we had to raise a requisition that was approved, quickly approved within the system, and then our procurement officer had to raise a PO, which was also approved, since all these personnel were under one building. Okay? So at the moment, ADCON was provided with the PO. At this stage, they confirmed the receipt and advised that the goods will be supplied within 10 to 12 weeks. And thereafter, this is the end part of the procurement process, where after 10 or 12 weeks, an invoice will be sent to the country office, and the goods will be delivered and checked for compliance. And then the issue of compliance, I think ZMT, as the technical experts, will assist the country office to verify, and then the payment will be made. And on the advantages of using LTS, as Mr. Mkelewa mentioned, there is a standardization of weather observing network, meaning there will be quality and technical standards met across the network. There will be same types of spares, because the supplier is ADCON, and throughout we have ADCON equipment. And sorry, I missed the first part. It's shortened procurement procedures. Other than going the process of, for example, invitation to bids, evaluation of bids, that we didn't go through. And I can give you an example of a long process, which is now with the Regional Service Center, the Regional Advisory Committee on Procurement. We went through the ITBs, and we started this process way before this. And I think it has taken maybe up to 2 months now, and still here for clarifications. Another advantage which we did not mention is there is a 15% discount on goods that are above 250,000. So on that saving, our innovative project manager, I'm sure, can find a few ways on how to take advantage of that saving to improve the strengthening capacity of the Zambia Meteorological Department. I thank you.
So you bought the ATCOM stations with and without, well, initially without the LTA and now with the LTA. Can you say something about the price difference between the MES stations without LTA and the MES stations bought under the LTA? What kind of savings do the, or maybe Ms. Elena, maybe you know more about this?
Yeah, except that I don't know you do have the volume discounts. So I would imagine the prices are lower than what you had originally paid for the equipment from ADCON, but I don't have knowledge of the pricing, the original pricing.
And probably some of the countries are saying, well, the LTA, it's all, especially for hydrology, it's going to take a while before the LTA for hydrology is in place. But once it is in place, it would be good to have an idea about how much you can save by waiting a bit longer, basically.
We can come up with a price comparison, maybe based on the recent procurement process for hydrological equipment that we did for Malawi, and then possibly compare, pricing that we envisage for the LTAs. But it's of course difficult to pinpoint because we don't know the pricing that will be offered in the proposals yet. But we could do a market analysis and provide a sort of an estimated difference in the pricing and value for money there. Yeah.
And in Zambia?
It's hard to compare the two because the equipment that will be on each station is not the same. We have gone for a little bit more for each station as compared to what was there before. So we wouldn't really compare them to.
Member can also chip in. Before, we had a consultant from Addis that had come in to do a procurement assessment. And the value he put on the automatic weather stations was high. And if you compare to the amount on the LTA, I think it's way, way below. And if you look at our annual work plan, we had budgeted, I think, over 900,000. And the LTA has given us up to 400,000. So that's a huge difference.
Mine is just a suggestion. As Ethiopia has accumulated a good experience in the procurement of both hydrology and meteorological equipment, and we have also well-organized procurement unit in the country office. We are even supporting the regional service center in the various procurement and other UN agents also going through the procurement unit of the country office. So if it is feasible, I just want to suggest that the country office is very willing to support countries to process the procurement, both hydrological and meteorological equipment.
It's not really the question, but since we are doing in case of Burkina Faso, you also have some experience from the station. So if you give some idea about the budget that has been used, like in our former project, in African Adaptation Program, we had purchased 16 weather stations from ATCOM, and it came with all the support of the training, installation, and I think they have at least conducted 3 times of the training session after the installation of the weather station. And then it costed about 200,000 US dollar. And now, in this early warning system project, we are supposed to purchase 50 weather stations, and it comes with a training session and a different equipment, and the budget is about 950,000 US dollar. It's not easy to compare, but it just gives you some idea about it.
Sorry, excuse my ignorance about procurement, but I wanted to find out that has CIRDA decided that all the equipment will be bought from Anticon, and what has happened to the process of tendering so that people can compete, or companies can compete?
I think this is one better for Metalena.
So just to understand your question, you're asking if there is still competition for various suppliers in terms of providing the equipment and services. And of course there is. I mean, as I understand it from the CIRDA technical team, they recommend that you consider utilizing the LTAs that are already in place, both in terms of value for money and time and resource savings. But of course, if your project would like to do a tender process and open up the market and competition for other suppliers, by all means, that's perfectly fine. And PSO can again assist you through the process, through the tender process, if that's your preferred route. I don't think CIRDA are saying that you have to use the ADCON LTAs or the other two envisaged LTAs. Maybe Bonnie wants to comment on that.
Very simple. CIRDA cannot tell you to do anything. It's a support program. You tell CIRDA what you want to do, how we can help you, and we do it. So we were asked over and over, we need procurement support. We hired the best people we could, as always, the PSO office in Copenhagen, and we offer their help, and we can pay for their help for you. Because the CIRDA has been established to support the 11 national countries. We will never tell you what to do. It's, you know, the conversation we had before was stimulating a dialogue, was not telling you what to do, because again, it's the other way around. You tell us what you want and we will provide the service. That's the spirit. Thank you.
Is there an issue with the word of standardization? Like you said, if a country has already had a specific, like in Zambia's case, ADCON stations, they can continue buying ADCON under the LTA as long as the LTA is still active, right?
As long as it's valid, and it's valid until September 2017, so there are a few years left. But it may very well be extended by WFP, or there may be a new tender process where ADCON is again put on an LTA. We don't know that yet. So yes, they can continue using the ADCON LTA.
And the installation of all these, was that done by ZNP? The materials, the cost of the materials, the fencing, the power, and all of the additional services. Is that cost borne by MedService?
In the agreement that we have, is that they were installing most of them, and then they even had to put security wire around some of them, and that was all covered. Yes.
The reason we wound up with ADCON is not from CIRDA, but it turns out that in the course of doing our research, we discovered that, first of all, several of you, Zambia, Burkina Faso, have had good experiences with ADCON and have an installed base. And then I think it's purely fortuitous that the World Food Program had put its own LTA in place, which we were able to then gain access to help at least these two countries move ahead. So that one's in place, ready to use. We've got a good experience base. We have some understanding of how that system works. That doesn't mean there aren't other very good automatic weather stations out there, but it just turns out this is what we have at the present time, and we know something about them, and they work well. So if you want to do a different type of station, okay, but then we have to go through a regular procurement process.
I think I have no comment to add on that, but just agreeing with it.
Can I just make one suggestion? That following from what Bonnie has just said, if we could have CIRDA take responsibility for option 2 to cut across all the countries, so that we are only left with the responsibility of clarifying on the specifications and consulting with Jeremy, so that there is a cut-off point, and all we wait for are what we have requested for. Is that okay?
Of course, to the PSO office.
Yes. Cut across the board.
For everyone.
And CIRDA takes responsibility for the 3% fee.
I don't know about the fee. Don't ask me that. All I know, I cannot answer to that. I have to ask the country offices. I don't know. But what I can tell you is that in the old days, when the project was approved at the JF Council, I was there. The donors actually wanted to encourage
procuring by the bulk. So if countries want to get together and say we buy more stuff of similar type, so we will pay less because we will do it in one procurement action, I think that is doable, because I remember it was part of the idea of having the CIRDA support. Then from here to outsourcing whatever, I also think that every country probably has different ideas. So before deciding for all 11, I would rather consult with each and one of you and then see if your proposal goes, and then we will see how to make it happen. But I think there are differentiated approaches to procurement, that it's possible to bundle countries together definitely and save money and time.
So segregation or delegation of responsibilities under each option, option 1 and option 2. Was that what you were asking for?
No, because I don't know what the other countries think,
But I think the issue is we are all looking at receiving this equipment in the shortest possible time. And if you have to go by option 1 and option 2, technically in terms of procurement procedures, option 1 will be so demanding. So what I was suggesting is, if it is acceptable, all the countries would go in for option 2. And then we agree to pay the 3% fee to PSO. So that all that is left is just to make clarifications on the final specifications in line with Jeremy, who is, and of course, Jon Snow. And then we just wait to receive the equipment.
Consolidating your procurement requirements and doing it under one process?
No, not consolidating. There may be some bit of variations in the specifications according to the country's needs.
Right.
But we were looking at option 1 and 2. And we were saying we all go for option 2.
And when you say option 2, you're talking about the options under the LOU.
Yes.
Correct? So outsourcing
Yes.
to PSO.
Exactly.
Which is possible, but I mean, you're all at very different stages of your procurement right now. So I don't know if that's feasible at this point to say you all go for option 2, because many of the country offices have already initiated their procurement processes or are doing their own procurement processes with our assistance, for example.
Well, whatever the case, we don't have to wait for all to be ready. It is a principle. It is a principle. If it is accepted, then each one, once you're ready, you go in.
Yes.
And leave it with the PSO to handle.
Yes, if you want to outsource to PSO, yes.
Exactly.
Yes, definitely.
Thank
yeah.
you.